Hello, Paige.
Hey, how's it going, Eddie?
Good. How are you?
Doing great as well. Just
That's
getting
good.
lots of work done.
Yeah, I know what it's like.
Yeah, I know you do.
Yeah, I'm out here in Colorado Springs, and I still feel like I'm in a winter wonderland because of the snow and everything that I'm still witnessing up here.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah, it feels really different here. It doesn't feel anything like that, which I wish it did, because like it kind of feels like it's not, winter or like the holiday season anymore.
I know, it's crazy. I don't know. They're talking about Texas is gonna get it later, but I mean, I think we've already seen, or not we, but Texas has already seen their little freeze just a little bit, not too much though.
hmm Yeah, it is what it is. That's Texas.
Yeah.
Hey, Belle, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, Miss Paige. How you doing?
I'm doing great as well. Uh, just getting back into work, into the swing of things, since I was
Uh,
on vacation up until Monday.
yeah, I saw you, Kalahari. That's good. It's a nice spot. I took my family there. It's awesome.
Nice. Yeah, I had
Yeah.
never heard about it before. It's so cool.
Oh yeah, it's at the little one adult setting. I could go and have me a drink while the kids go. That's just
Exactly.
me. That's just me.
Yeah.
But thanks for having me in today. I'm still keeping up with the plan. I'm going as much as I can. Just my business has got me working 6 days a week, and employees come, employees go, and when they go, I have to fill in. So yeah.
Yeah. No, I totally get it. So you're totally good.
I'm
But
in grinding mode.
yeah, yep, I hear you. I
Yeah.
know exactly what you mean. So I applaud you for that hard work.
Hey, same to you. Same to you, man. Same to you. Hey, also, I need to. I did miss your premiere. Is that going to be out on video or stream
Um,
services soon?
yeah, so I don't know when it's going to be available to watch online because
Hmm.
the director wants to do like live showings first.
Okay.
So
Okay.
and we have been doing that. So we have one in Houston in mid-January and live then showings first. Let me.
Okay.
So
Okay.
and we
All
have
right.
been doing that.
Gotcha.
Sorry, just a second. I gotta mute Facebook real quick. There's like a delay.
Yeah, there was like a little bit of that background. I heard it.
Here we go. Okay. Cool, cool. All right, can you guys hear me now? Awesome. Hey, Tanya. Thanks for joining. Okay, cool. So I'm already live in Facebook. Hey, Facebook, if you guys have any questions or comments, just type it in the comment section on Facebook. Those of you who are in my Zoom, if y'all could wait to ask questions until like towards the end. And meanwhile, just mute yourselves just in case, so there aren't any like interruptions or anything like that. But yeah, so today we are talking about training to failure for best muscle growth and efficiency. So if you're wanting to build muscle and you're wanting to build muscle in the most efficient way, meaning saving your own time, saving your own energy, then this is the way to do it. And we're going to be covering the science behind all of it and why training to failure is more effective than the conventional way of training that most people train. So, first, let's cover what is training to failure. So, training to failure, specifically training to momentary muscular failure, which is otherwise known as MMF, is basically doing an exercise to a point that you so fully fatigue whatever muscle that you're working that you literally cannot perform a single rep more. So rep is a repetition, if anyone's not familiar with some training terms. So if you're doing bicep curls like this is 1 rep, 2 reps, 3 reps, et cetera, et cetera. So when you're training to failure, you're coming to a point to where you literally cannot pull the weight up any higher, even though you are pulling as hard as you can, you're flexing that muscle as hard as you can, but the weight literally will not budge. That is training to failure or momentary muscular failure. So, and when it comes to training to failure, there are some people who say that they do train to failure, and they truly do think that they are training to failure, but in actuality, they are not training to failure. And this even applies to experienced lifters. I've seen a lot of experienced lifters say that they train to failure, and I'm looking at their sets and I'm like, that's not true failure. So we're going to be going over the different terms, the different styles of training that people do, and why a lot of people think that they are training to failure when they actually aren't. And we're going to cover what those different situations look like. So I'm not just going to explain these things by word. I'm also going to show you examples of what training to failure does and does not look like. So one big reason why people who think they're training to failure, but they actually aren't, is because many people, when they are doing weight training, they default to high volume training. So what is high volume training? That's doing many exercises and many sets per exercise. So one exercise is squat, another exercise is bicep curls. So you're doing a bunch of different exercises, and sets are, doing multiple rounds of that one exercise. So let's say you're doing 3 sets of squat, 3 sets of leg press, 3 sets of deadlift, 3 sets of leg curl. Like, that's a lot of volume. And that's what I mean by volume when I say volume. So when it comes to a workout, you can either choose to prioritize volume, which is that example that I just gave you, or prioritize intensity. You cannot have both at the same time. If you do, you will find in your workout, you will fry very, very quickly. You'll fry your central nervous system because it'll become extremely fatigued. And you'll basically come to this point where you hit a wall in your workout to where it doesn't matter how much motivation you have inside of yourself, doesn't matter how much hard you make yourself try, you cannot give the same amount of effort for an extended period of time. So again, you cannot have both high volume and high intensity. The only time you can do that is very, very rare occasions, like if you're competing in like a professional competition, like let's say you compete in strongman. Yes, they're doing high volume of stuff and high intensity. They're training to failure, but between whatever exercises or activities they're doing, they have long bouts of rest. So basically their competitions take, maybe a couple of hours or so, because there's so much rest between activities, because that's the only way that you can have high volume and high intensity. But you'll note that strongman competitors like that, they only perform that way during their meets. They might, occasionally do it in their training leading up to their competition, but I can guarantee you they are not training like that all the time. So you cannot train high volume, high intensity all the time. And if you are, you have to spend hours doing it because you have to have rest in between. So in reality, most people are not going to be working out for hours on end every single day. So when it comes to you and your fitness goals, you can either pick one of the two, high volume or high intensity. And I'm going to be showing you why you should choose high intensity. In other words, training to failure. So let's see. So what's the problem with high volume training? Most people train high volume, but what's the problem behind that? So the main problem behind prioritizing high volume training over high intensity, in other words, training to failure, is that it is inefficient. And for a lot of natural lifters, it can also not be as effective as high intensity failure training. So why is this? So high volume training prioritizes the number of exercises and sets that you're doing, meaning you're doing many exercises and multiple sets per workout. And this inevitably means that you have to have more time in the gym because you're doing more volume, you're doing more activities. So you have to have more time in the gym in order to create a stimulus for your body. And we'll go over that in just a second. And you have to have more gym sessions per week. So many people who train high volume, they are lifting 4, 5, 6, even 7 times a week. And their workouts can be anywhere, for all of those sessions, can be anywhere from like, I would say an hour to like 2 hours. So that's a lot of time in the gym. And many people don't have that time. And it's not as efficient time-wise, obviously, and it's not as efficient for building muscle mass. So imagine that you're really, really strong. Let's say that you can like squat 400 pounds for like 10 reps. So you're really strong, but you grab a toaster in your kitchen. Maybe that toaster is only 3 pounds, and you begin to do arm curls with that toaster. Do you guys think that that toaster is heavy enough to deliver a stimulus to tell your muscles to grow? And you guys can unmute yourselves and answer if y'all want to. Belle, what do you think?
I think at one point it will, but you're starting to tend to burn out if I'm right. And I pick a toaster.
Okay.
That's fine, my opinion. Now,
Well,
go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
that's okay. You can go ahead and clarify if you want.
What I mean is, it's not doing a burnout, like doing your method. If I was to do that, I'll burn out easily using that toaster. But just trying to do, like you saying, reps like that, it taking that weight. No, it won't achieve what I want.
Okay. Yeah. So you feel like it wouldn't lead to muscle growth, right? Okay. Eddie, you were gonna say something. What do you think?
Yeah, I know that when you're talking about when it comes to failure, um, I've done isolations, and it's basically isolating a certain muscle type. Well, actually, a certain muscle in order for you to. Well, when I was doing it, or whenever I have the opportunity to, I would lift and until it was to like maybe the L shape of your arm, to you can't pick it up anymore, right? But then when you do heavy weights, because I've done both, I've done something that's maybe, I don't know, 20 pounds to something that's with a barbell and maybe close
Well,
to like,
let's keep it to the toaster example. So in this
right, right.
extreme case, as a very lightweight toaster, it's only 3 pounds.
Mhm.
Do you think that that's going to stimulate muscular growth?
It will stimulate muscular growth because all you're doing is that it's more repetitions than it is that when if you're doing something that's a little bit more heavier.
Okay, so why do you think repetitions are behind muscular growth?
Well, with everything that you do, you always you always have to shock your muscles. So say if you're doing something all day and then you go to something a lot lighter, you're going to lift it a lot more and a lot heavier. So it's basically you're isolating that certain type of muscle.
Okay, so I'm gonna cover the problems behind that. So that's actually not true. Number of repetitions is not behind muscular growth. If
Okay.
that were the case, you could walk all day long and have bodybuilder legs. So you have lots of reps with, taking a step. It's like thousands and thousands of steps. But
Right.
there's no way you're going to build bodybuilder legs because number of repetitions is not behind muscular growth. Number of repetitions is not behind muscular growth. Mechanical tension is. So let me cover that real quick. Okay, if you guys could mute yourselves real quick, please. Okay, awesome. So, mechanical tension is what drives hypertrophy, and hypertrophy is muscle growth. So in the example of the toaster, it's really lightweight. You're already strong. So that's like an especially lightweight for you. So lifting that toaster, that really light toaster, multiple reps upon reps upon reps, is not creating enough mechanical tension. Yes, you are flexing your bicep slightly, but you're not flexing it fully. And it's not heavy enough for your current level of strength to actually create maximal mechanical tension. Now, that is an extreme example. This is not to say that light weights cannot deliver muscular growth. So that was an extreme example. So let's take it to, let's say you have a really heavy weight. Let's say you can only do 5 reps of it. Like, let's say it's 400 pounds and you're trying to squat it. You can only squat it 5 times. Is that delivering full mechanical tension? Yes, because you've reached failure. You've come to this point to where you cannot squat that 400 pounds anymore. So you have reached full mechanical tension. Now, let's make it a little bit more moderate. Let's say that you're squatting 225 pounds and you can squat it for 20 reps, but you reach failure in that 20 reps. Have you achieved sufficient muscular tension? Yes, because you have reached failure. In the scenario of the toaster, or in the scenario of walking all day long, you can keep walking. You might feel tired, like overall, there's such a thing as systemic fatigue, where your entire body feels fatigued, but your leg muscles can still do actual work. And your bicep can still keep curling that toaster if it's only like 3 pounds, like something super, super light. So it's going to be very, very hard to achieve muscular mechanical tension, which is the driver for hypertrophy, muscle growth. So the key thing behind mechanical tension is you have to stimulate the muscle enough to where you are either achieving full failure, which is the ideal, or very, very close to failure. And that is mechanical tension, which drives hypertrophy, muscle growth. Let me see real quick. And this is all based off of your own levels of strength. So let's say you have a very elderly person who is very, very weak. Let's say they've been bedridden for a while. That 3-pound toaster probably is enough to achieve mechanical tension in their bicep and pretty quickly reach failure. There have been studies done that show when you choose a weight that you can get more than 30 reps, your ability to discern your failure limit drastically reduces, because it kind of switches from like training your muscular systems to like endurance. And it also switches partly from muscle fiber types, which we'll cover that later on. So if you contrast this to high intensity training, again, which is training to failure, which is the topic of this training. So do you think if you grabbed a concrete ball and you squatted until you literally could not squat anymore, that your muscles in your legs would have high and even full mechanical tension? Yes, because you've chosen a challenging weight and you've come to this point to where you literally cannot squat that concrete ball anymore, because no matter how hard you were trying to push, no matter how hard you're trying to flex your leg muscles. So at that point, when you've reached failure, you've achieved full mechanical tension, which is the driving force behind hypertrophy. So if you want to maximize hypertrophy while saving time, meaning being efficient in your training, then you should choose to train to failure. So when you train to failure, this also means that you should choose to train with a very low volume, which again means that you'll save time too, because you're not spending hours in the gym per workout, and you're also not having to work out, 3, 4, 5, 6 days a week. And there is science behind that too. I can't cover that in this training here. But if any of you guys watching now or watching later are interested in the science behind workout frequency, I have another training on that topic that provides all of the science behind that as well. So also when it comes to muscle hypertrophy, which is muscle growth, there is the topic of muscle fiber types. So hold on, sorry guys, I'm looking at my notes, but it like keeps skipping around for some reason. Okay, so in the example of walking long distance, let's say you walk for 3 hours, and let's say you're doing a 1 rep max, like say you're squatting 600 pounds and you literally can only do 1 rep. That's the difference between something very low intensity or lightweight versus something very high intensity or very heavyweight. Now, when I say heavyweight, it's not that you have to choose heavy weights, it's that you have to choose something that is very fatiguing for you. That's the main thing behind all of this. So in essence, you have 2 main muscle types. You do have a little bit more, but in essence, 2 main muscle types, which are type 1 muscle fibers and type 2 muscle fibers. So type 1 muscle fibers are slow twitch dominant, and your body uses these fibers during low to moderate intensity activities like walking or jogging long distance. So something that you can do for a long period of time without your muscles becoming fatigued. Again, this is different from overall systemic fatigue versus like, the muscles actually being fully fatigued. Like, yeah, you could jog for like an hour and a half and feel fatigued overall, but you have not fully fatigued those target muscles, like i.e. your legs, for example. So type 1 muscle fibers also have a recycling capability, which is actually what makes them able to do long periods of work without fatigue. So basically, like say you are walking for 2 hours, the reason why you can walk for 2 hours and not feel great fatigue in your legs is because the activity that you're doing is type 1 dominant. You're using your type 1 muscle fibers, and they have ability to recycle some of them on while the other ones are cycling off. So they have an ability to, some of them are resting while the others are working, and they go on and off, on and off. And that's why you can do low intensity and moderate intensity exercises like that for so long. So type 2 muscle fibers are fast twitch muscle fibers, and your body uses these fibers during heavy or explosive activities. They also kick in when your muscles get very, very fatigued. So type 2 muscle fibers are used during activities like short sprints. So sprinting is like literally running as fast as you can, but you can only sprint for maybe 20 to 30 seconds at a time until the type 2 muscle fibers become fully fatigued and you can't run as fast anymore. They're also used during activities like performing a 1 rep max on a squat. So say you can squat 500 pounds for 1 rep only, you're using your type 2 muscle fibers. High jumping, so you're trying to jump literally as high as you can, that's your type 2 muscle fibers. So type 2 muscle fibers do not have a recycling ability, and they only have they can only produce effort at about maybe it depends on the activity, anywhere from maybe 5 to 30 seconds, and then they're pooped, and then you just have to rest for a bit. And then eventually they'll be able to kick back on. But in essence, they can, that's the longest that they can perform for. But type 2 muscle fibers have the greatest muscle size and strength potential. That means if you're trying to build muscle, you should aim to predominantly target your type 2 muscle fibers. Yes, you can grow your type 1 muscle fibers, but their size potential and strength potential is not nearly as high as type 2 muscle fibers. Man, there was another point I was going to make on muscle fibers, but I don't remember what it was. Well, phooey. Okay, anyway. So when you use lighter weights, like in the example of the really light toaster for bicep curls, do you think that you guys are using type 1 or type 2 muscle fibers? One person can answer. Okay, so Lawrence Bell says 1. Yes, you're correct. So, and again, the reason is because it's so low stimulus that your body, it doesn't need to use the type 2 muscle fibers. It can use the type 1 to conserve energy and to also allow you to perform it, you know, all day, like say if you needed to. Let's see. Okay. Yeah, and it has that recycling capability as well. The same thing with walking. Like if you're walking a couple of miles, it might take you like about an hour to walk, maybe 3 miles or so. But because you only targeted your type 1 muscle fibers, you're not going to build significant muscle mass. On the topic of like newbie gains, that is a different topic. And I will say that gains like that do taper off very quickly. But like, let's say that you have been bedridden for like 2 months and then you start walking daily. Are you going to build muscle? Yes. Are you going to build significant muscle? No. Is it going to keep on growing, you know, after 2 or 3 months of walking like that, after you've been bedridden for so long? No. You're going to quickly reach a cap of muscle building potential. So that aside, low intensity training is not, like in those examples, is not going to deliver muscle growth. So let's also compare it to marathon runners. So marathon runners, they're running long distance, but they are doing low intensity to moderate intensity, depending on their skill level. Compare marathon runners to sprinters. They are doing short distance, but maximal effort. But sprinters always have much more muscular bodies because they are targeting and fatiguing their type 2 muscle fibers. And again, type 2 muscle fibers have the greatest muscle and strength potential. You can also compare the time that marathoners and sprinters run for. Marathoners run for about 4.5 hours. Again, this is high volume. It's a long amount of time, but it's low intensity. And that's why they're able to do it for so long. And sprinters can sprint, you know, let's say they have different races, but let's say they're doing 200 meters. They typically run that in about 17 to 24 seconds. So that's an example of high intensity. They're running as hard as they can, but low volume. The time that they're doing it is very, very low. Yes, you could argue the training is different than their actual competition run, but I can guarantee you that the way that they train is, you know, they will do bouts of sprinting for those short periods of time, like, you know, let's say like 15 to 30 seconds, whatever, but they will have times of rest before their next sprinting set, so to speak. So you can equivalent that to, you know, you're working out in the gym, you squat 1 set to failure, and then you rest for a couple of minutes, and then you go to your next exercise. It's the same thing. You are doing high intensity, but low volume, just like the sprinters are. So how do you train to failure for best results? So as I said earlier, most people who think that they are training to failure, even experienced lifters, actually are not training to failure. And an interesting topic, there are even scientific researchers who have, I'm thinking of one in particular, who think that they train to failure, but they're actually not. And I'll show you an example of that. And so what they are actually doing is they are training to perceived failure, which is otherwise known as volitional failure, meaning I think I have reached failure for my muscles, when in reality, they have not reached failure in their muscle. So the reason behind this is, I would say, predominantly twofold. Training to failure is a learning process for everyone, and that's why even some experienced lifters don't know how to do it. And it's partly both a physical and a mental learning process, because you have to learn how to push past temporary physical discomfort. You know, training to failure, it's not the most comfortable thing, but if you think of it in terms of, like, you know, the time behind it, if you're only doing a set to failure and it takes you 45 seconds, is that whole 45 seconds going to be uncomfortable? No, probably the last, 10 to 15 seconds are going to be uncomfortable. And when I say uncomfortable, it's not painful, like you shouldn't be experiencing any pain, but you do get that burning sensation in your muscles. So it's not very comfortable in that aspect, but it has great benefit behind it. So that's what also makes it a mental thing that you have to learn to push past. Your mind might tell you, like, this feels uncomfortable, I want to stop. But when you know the science and the results behind it, it helps you to learn to push past the physical and mental discomfort. The other reason is most people don't know what training to failure actually looks or feels like. And I would say a big reason why is because most people don't train to failure. They do high volume, low intensity. And that's another topic for another day, why that's so, or at least my suspicion as to why that became popular in the 60s. But anyway, so let's see. Okay, so I wanted to touch on something real quick. When I mentioned about volitional failure, meaning thinking you perceived failure, if you are doing low volume training, which I recommend, you should note that you will not see as great of results if you are performing sets to volitional failure. So you do not want to train sets to volitional failure if you're doing low volume. You want to train to actual true failure, momentary muscular failure. So there was a study done on resistance trained men who were separated into 3 groups. Each group performed only 1 set twice a week for a total of 10 weeks. So that's very, very low volume, which is awesome. So one group performed sets to perceived max. So that's thinking they reached failure. The second group performed sets to momentary muscular failure, which is what I am recommending to you. And the third group performed sets in a rest pause style. And I'm going to show you an example of that. So at the end, the perceived rep max group, the group who thought they were training to failure, they didn't improve in any way. So that's muscle and strength gains. But the other 2 did, particularly the group who trained to momentary muscular failure, who outshined both of the groups in strength gains, muscle gains, and fat loss. If you guys want to see the study on this, I'm going to create a guide over this whole topic. And it'll be available tomorrow for you guys. So if y'all want it, just comment on the post today or tomorrow. So now let's go ahead. I'm going to show you guys some examples of what training to failure is not. So let me, before I do that real quick, does anybody have any questions? Okay, cool. So I'm going to share my screen. Okay, so this is a really interesting example. This is an example of someone who thinks they performed a failure, but they actually did not. So this guy right here, his name is Brad Schoenfeld. He is an extremely well-known scientific researcher on the subject of fitness and training. And he basically, well, so in this workout, this is Mountain Dog, by the way. He died recently, but he was a really cool guy. Anyways, they are working out together, and they are aiming to train to failure in this workout. And so basically they're saying that they are training to failure, but I'm going to show you that they are not.
All right, we're going set 2 here.
Let me turn down the volume real quick. Okay. So, as you can see, he's pulling the weight. He kind of has to like use momentum to get the weight all the way down, which I would say isn't as effective, but that's a different topic for another day. And then he's almost done with the set. Okay, so he finishes there. Now, as you can see, the weight may have started to slow down and not come down as low as before, but he technically has not reached failure. He could have kept going, because when you reach failure, you literally come to this point to where you cannot move the weight anymore. He was still moving the weight, and he was moving the weight at a pretty good speed. Now, Brad Schoenfeld is going to go next, and his example is even worse. And he is like a leading scientific research who does research on training to failure versus high volume. And he has his own opinions on it. But if he's doing research on training to failure, but he himself doesn't even know what training looks and feels like, otherwise he would have pointed it out to him. And you'll see with him, he would have actually been able to train to true failure. So let's see Brad Schoenfeld do it. So let's hear them talk. Because
failure set.
See, failure set. Yep, that's what they're aiming to do.
All right, those elbows, squeeze. Good. 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 All the way to failure. There we go, all the way to failure.
Okay,
so one question.
Did you guys hear that? He said, that's my failure. By the way, I don't know, can you guys hear what they're saying? Y'all can unmute themselves. Yes, sir. Okay, so you could hear what they were saying.
Yeah, and I understand what the failure means, because he completed the whole thing. I see you. I see what you mean. Yeah, that's what you was getting me about. I got it now. I got it.
Yeah, absolutely. So these are two guys. They are talking about the topic of training to failure, and they are saying that they are training to failure, but they are not. So let's go back to Brad Schoenfeld real quick. So, again, he's a leading scientific researcher. The weight's still moving. It may be slowing down a little bit.
There we go.
But it's still moving. See, he says, that's my failure. So he thinks that he has reached failure. So this is a really good example of, these are experienced lifters, and they think they are training to failure, but they actually are not. Now, both of these guys are proponents of very high volume, but remember what I said about high volume. If you choose high volume, you have to do low intensity. So I think a big problem for people who don't know the science behind training to failure versus high volume, which I wish I could cover all of that for you guys, but we're already at like 40 minutes, is I think that, so because training to high volume is so conventional, people who train high volume, they are working out. They could be working out with higher intensity, but because they're working out with high volume, inevitably their intensity is going to diminish. So I do think that they really do think they're training to failure, high intensity, but they're actually not. They just don't have experience behind it, because in their mind, they go to their workout session knowing that they're going to do this amount of volume of work. And that's a big problem behind a lot of people, is they approach their training backwards. They first set how many exercises they're going to do and how many sets they're going to do, rather instead basing their workout off of their intensity. So if you go in the gym knowing I'm going to train to failure, you can go into your workout and you'll realize you're only able to do maybe like 8 sets max total, and you can't do anymore. And these guys are probably doing like anywhere from like 20 to like 30 sets per exercise, which is really, really high. Okay. So now I'm going to show you guys an example of what training to failure actually looks like. So here is this guy, Mike Menser. He was a really popular bodybuilder in the 1970s and 80s. I think he died in the 80s. Let me mute my phone real quick. And during his time, he was the only professional bodybuilder who literally only trained 3 times a week, 1 set per exercise. And it's because he knew the science behind it. So all the other lifters, including Arnold, were working out 6 days a week, oftentimes 2 sessions per day, like a couple of hours per session. So they were doing extremely high volume. Now, I'm sure as you guys know, all of them were taking steroids. So that is a little bit different when you compare like steroid users versus natural lifters like we are. But even still, like he technically he won second place, but he won second place to Arnold. But there's a lot of like conspiracy behind it, thinking that like the judges were felt pressured to give it to Arnold because he had won all the other ones previously. And a lot of people actually think that Mike Menser actually had a better physique than Arnold. But anyway, so here's an example of him training to failure and what that looks like. So you see like just how hard he's training there. That rep is not failure, but he's close to failure. He goes to push again, and it really starts to slow down really hard. And he actually has this guy force the weight up for him, which I actually don't recommend you guys do that. That is called forced reps. I think if you are doing forced reps, you're going past failure, and that's not necessary. And it can actually lead to more systemic fatigue overall, which can hinder your recovery afterwards. But like if you take, I think there's another clip right after this. So yeah, right here. So like just look at how hard he's straining. And again, he has the guy helping him. So this is not the best example. Also, when he shimmies his neck to like try to get the weight up, I don't recommend you guys do that either. It's really important to have like proper form all throughout every exercise you do, even when you get fatigued. So let's see that again. So yeah, see him like shift his neck side to side. Don't do that because that can be dangerous for your neck. So that's an example of him. Here's an example of me showing you what training to failure looks like. So a little disclaimer, I had not done this exercise in a while, so I actually accidentally overestimated my weight. So the weight's a little bit too heavy for me, so my form breaks a little bit. But if you disregard that, you can still see the concept that I'm talking about. So as you can see here, I'm keeping constant tension on the muscle all throughout, meaning I never let my muscles take a break. As soon as I start the set, I keep tension on the muscle the whole time. I'm also doing it very slow and controlled as well, which is impactful for muscle growth as well. But pay attention to how I keep going, even though the weight is slowing down substantially. See, basically I've come to failure. That's failure right there. I literally could not move the weight anymore. I wish I could rewind this. So as you may have noticed, the weight stopped where my elbow was right here. So full range of motion would be my elbow comes to my rib cage, which is how the first couple reps looked like. And then as I got fatigued, the range of motion slowly started to decrease because, again, my muscles were becoming fatigued due to the mechanical tension. But I kept going until I could only get about half of the range of motion. And once you see that stop there, again, I wish I could fast forward it for you guys. So let's just let it play one more time through. So again, this is so full range of motion there. Another full range of motion there. Again, because I can. And as I get fatigued, it's not that I choose not to get full range of motion. It's I literally cannot get full range of motion anymore. So it's starting to decrease. My muscles are getting fatigued, but I keep going because I know I still have some left in me. I think that was the last one. No, this one's the last one here. So see how much the weight slows down? That is reaching momentary muscular failure. Not quite, it's leading up to it. So the weight is still moving. It might be moving very, very slowly, but it is still moving, which means that if it's still moving, I have not reached momentary muscular failure. But I get to this point to where it literally won't move anymore. And so I just decide to like keep trying, but I end up just holding it there because my muscles can't do any more work. That is momentary muscular failure. And that is what delivers the best muscular and strength gains. And when you train this way, you only have to do one set per exercise. That's it. Here's another example here. So do you guys remember that example that I gave you of rest pause? How of the three groups, momentary muscular failure and rest pause delivered better results than perceived failure, but rest pause did not deliver as good of results as momentary muscular failure. So this is an example of perceived failure, volitional failure. I'm sorry, not that, rest pause. Sorry, guys. This is an example of rest pause. So the first couple reps, I do them pretty quickly, but you can see between the reps, I'm like kind of resting. Like, so there's like a pretty long time between reps. This is considered rest pause style. So I'll pull it up again. I'm feeling fatigued, so I'm basically resting between my reps. You see that? That's pretty long time. So this is an example of rest pause training. And while it still can be effective, it's not as effective as what I showed you over here, which were continuous reps, meaning there is constant tension on the target muscles during that entire set. So this is what training to failure looks like, training to momentary muscular failure. Real quick, here's another example of, or is this one a better? This was in 2018. This was back when I thought I was training to failure, but I actually wasn't. So pay more attention towards the end. The weight will start to slow down, but I don't reach true momentary muscular failure. I reach volitional failure, which is thinking I can't do anymore, just like Mountain Dog and Brad Schoenfeld. Ignore my form. My form wasn't very good back then. So notice the weight started to slow down, but it didn't stop. I could have kept going, but I didn't. So that's another example. I've been there before. I was probably training at that point for like maybe 3 years. And even then, I didn't know what training to momentary muscular failure looked or felt like. So yeah, what do you guys think of that? Do you guys have any questions?
It's spot on, Paige. Like I say, I needed this for a refresher, man, because I'm trying to get back into the groove of things from when I was on your program, and you got on me about that, staying that, and you could treat me like, hey, see the video, you could have kept going. I'm like, I don't know. Now I get it. I
Yeah.
understand it completely, because I did try it one time, and I had to let the straps go. I mean, to that point when I burnt out my muscle, I couldn't do it. But I get it. Yeah, I get it. Thank you. I really appreciate it.
That's awesome. Yeah, it does really help to see it. What about you, Tanya? What do you think?
I thought it was great.
Awesome. Yeah.
I liked how you viewed the screen so we could see the differences in it. Like the ones who said that they were doing failure, but they really weren't.
Yeah. I found that super interesting, especially coming from that scientific researcher who he's done studies on training to failure. But it's like, if you don't even know what training to failure looks like, how do you know you're actually achieving that in the studies? But him aside, there is a lot of science out there that shows that training to failure is just as effective as training to doing high volume. And like I've said before, what I would argue with a lot of people, and I've found this personally. I've been lifting for years, guys. I found this personally, that even when you reduce your intensity and you train high volume, you still reach this burnout state to where you can't do that long term, because you're working out, so many, you have long workouts, you're doing a lot of volume, and you're working out multiple times a week, and your body just, it gets drained. And so that's why a lot of people who train that way, they have to do scheduled deloads, which is a deload is either a significantly reduced volume and intensity in training, or it's just taking complete time off of the gym to let your body recover. But if you only work out 2 times a week, and if you're working out efficiently in the first place, which is training to failure, which means you only need to do 1 set per exercise, you don't have to do regular deloads. That's why for those of you who are my clients, I don't give you guys deloads because you don't need it. You're only working out 2, max 3 times a week. And all those other days of rest, your body is able to recoup quickly and easily. John David says, good explanation. Awesome. I'm so glad. Cool. Does anybody else have any questions on Zoom or on Facebook?
Got one more page. I need to view this again as a refresher. Are you gonna post this, or you got other ones out there? I've been out of the loop a little bit. I apologize.
No,
I need to get that. It's just like, I like to look at your videos before I start working out, and they'll remind me to stay focused and keep that tension. Remember, that was my sin when you was training me, to keep that.
no worries. It's a learning process for everybody. Yeah, Alex Hormozy likes to say people don't need to be retaught, they need to be reminded. So it's totally cool that you want to watch this over again. Yes, so because we're live in Facebook, it is being posted in Facebook as well. But I'm also creating a guide that summarizes all of this, so that those of you who would prefer to read and just want to read it faster, because I know this video is kind of long, it's like an hour. Sorry guys, but I really wanted to explain everything well to you guys. That'll be out tomorrow. So I'll post that tomorrow as well. But yeah, Tanya, would you mind tagging him in this training?
Yeah, I'm more of a visual guy. I have to see it, then I can keep repeating it more until it gets muscle memory.
I get it. Yeah, I totally
Thanks,
understand. Yeah, you're super welcome. I'm glad to have you. What's that, Tanya?
I could do that.
Okay, awesome. Actually, I can just do that now. Sorry. Okay, here we go. You're good.
Paige.
Yeah.
Yeah, one of the things is that what I learned on what the bodybuilder and that guy that you had showed, I've done that type of exercise before. It's called a reverse military press, right? Because they're pull downs. The one thing that I saw that was a mistake from both those gentlemen that were actually working out was that they were leaning their body backwards to bring the weight down
Mhm.
instead of just basically sitting straight to bring the weight towards them. Just like the way the second gentleman that you had posted here, the way he was moving his neck to push it, right? I mean, you can definitely, oh my God, you can definitely hurt yourself that way, like
Oh,
big
yeah.
time. I remember just like when I had messaged you, I was working out and I hyperextended my deltoid on my left shoulder. You know, oh my God, that's just, and I think what happened was that I was pushing, but when I was pushing, I kind of did it too much with my right instead of my left, instead of doing it at the same time.
Mhm.
And I just kind of like, messed it up a little bit. I mean,
Yeah.
it's still healing, but I haven't been able to do anything high intensity in a while. But I do have a 25 pound um, kettlebell that I do use, and I've, gradually getting myself back into it. But going back to the lift as failure, one of the things that I've seen bodybuilders do, or even people in the gym, is that when they're doing arm curls, they'll throw they'll throw their body forward to bring it up, and that's not how you're supposed to do it. I mean,
Yeah.
you're just basically, that's an assistance, basically, is
Yeah.
what it is.
Basically, what they're doing is I like to call it they're cheating with
Hmm.
momentum.
Hmm.
Um, Now, okay, so you could say Olympic lifters, they use momentum. They're not cheating because that's specific for the sport and the lift.
Right.
But in terms of a muscle building perspective, in terms of proper form, that is cheating. You're using physics, which is momentum,
Hmm.
to help you get the weight up. That
Hmm.
means that whatever that weight that you selected was too heavy for your muscle, and your muscle it cannot lift that weight up.
Right.
And I would say that it's not that momentum is gonna like negate all muscle growth. I would say it's not as effective because you're limiting mechanical tension on that muscle. Um, but I would say you definitely do get better results if you do strict form, like the example that I showed you of that pull down video that I was doing.
Hmm.
Um, Minus the fact that I did a little bit too heavy, like I explained to you guys earlier.
Right. Right. It happens.
Mhm. Hey, Eddie, if I can speak, Paige, I can speak. Hey, Eddie, what I found out, I used to, be hard weights and everything. Of course, getting older, didn't do it. Couldn't, working out for a while. And then I noticed, well, when I got with Paige's program, she put me on resistance band. And I was like, resistance band? But when she got me on it,
Hmm.
there's no way to cheat the form, if you
Hmm.
understand. Get my just like what you talking about the curl, the box. Oh, it was no way. It was no way.
Hmm.
Not
Yeah.
resistance band. I don't know. It's just like it gave me a better perspective on resistance band. And we know we all used to be out there in the gym and hitting the hard weights, but I'm like, I'm finding gain a newfound respect for resistance bands because there's no way with the proper form you can't cheat on those.
Right. You can't throw your
You can't
weight.
throw. No.
Yeah, you can't throw the weight. And I do have resistant bands, and they go
Mm-hmm.
up to I want to say 220 pounds. So I mean, you're standing on them, and the way
Mm-hmm.
you stand on the bands is like the more you widen yourself, the more resistance you're actually going to get. So you can't throw it out there in order for you to
Mm-hmm.
do that, because you can't cheat on that other than if you
Mm-hmm.
have a dumbbell.
Right. I went out there. I got the Armor Gym hooks, and I got those in my garage. And and I can really get a good feel with those things. Along with Paige had me buy the ones that she when I was on a program
Mhm.
for the resistance bands, and then I just modified it recently and just got them in the garage. I can send you a picture. These little hooks, they're like $29. They come in a set of three, and I got one for upper, low, middle, and lower, and it's perfect. I was like, yeah, like I said, I haven't used my Bowflex dumbbells in a while. Just
Oh wow.
yeah, just sticking to that. I just see a
That's
pig,
cool.
man, and you see what I'm talking about. But yeah, I kind of modified it now, and I'm sticking to just those resistance bands, and they do work, man. I have a newfound respect for those things. So
That's good.
sorry,
Yeah,
Paige, let
it's a
me
good
take over.
point.
Just one minute.
That's a
There you
good
go.
point that
Thank
you
you.
bring up, Belle. Talking about like how you had doubts about, resistance bands because they're not as heavy as like, what you think you can do in the gym. This ties into what I was talking about earlier about like lighter weights. It's not that lighter weights aren't effective for muscle building, it's how you perform your sets. So for example, let's say you only have access to something really light. Like let's say you're doing dumbbell curls and you only have 15 pounds when you can normally do like 30 pounds. If you slow it down and you keep constant tension, meaning you're not resting between reps, you're not resting at the top where there's little tension, and you're not resting at the bottom where your biceps are relaxed. If you keep constant tension and you slow it down, you can make any weight harder. So it's not necessarily the weight that you choose, although that does come into play in extreme situations.
Mhm.
But in general, if you just make the weight feel harder, you can still come to that point where you reach actual failure.
Right, and you have a new word for it, but what I always learned, it was a isolation. You're basically isolating that weight, no matter if, like you said, if you're used to doing 30-pound weights and you go to 15-pound weights, you don't. What I've done before is that I don't fully extend my arms out if I'm doing 15 pounds. I basically, when I go back down, I'm still keeping it flexed to where the muscle is still working, and then I bring it back up. That's like basically no rest. You know what I mean? And that's the type of failure that I was going for. So it's basically going down, keeping my back straight or pressed up against the wall, right? And just go down, keeping my elbows to my body, and just come up slow, go back down, isolating it up and down until you actually can't do it anymore.
Mm. I wouldn't say that's the definition of isolation. Yes, bicep curls are an isolation exercise, but what you're explaining there is you are keeping tension on the muscle,
Right,
and
right.
that's what made it effective in that regard. So yeah, that's awesome that you did that. But yeah, so we are at over an hour. Unless nobody has any other questions, I'm gonna go ahead and stop the training. So I hope you guys liked it. I'm so glad y'all joined me. I hope this wasn't too long for you guys. I do try to keep this shorter, but I don't know. I like
When
going
you
into
have a lot of information, girl, you got to give it out there. You know what I mean? So
true. But yeah, thank you guys so much. And I'm testing out new live trainings. Normally I do it every Monday at 6:30 Central, but I'm considering changing it to Tuesdays, 6:30 Central, or Wednesdays, 6:30 Central. I'm thinking I'm leaning towards Tuesday, but just know we do live trainings every single week. So if you guys have a topic y'all want me to cover in the future, just post in the group your ideas, and that way I know what y'all want me to cover. But yeah, thank you guys so much. I will see you guys soon.
Thank you,
bye.
Paige.
You're so welcome. Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good one. Bye bye.